Hello everyone, Metal Horror Gamer here, and today I'm talking about the PS Vita. At first, the PS Vita was a handheld that I just didn't care too much about. I figured if Sony doesn't care about it, then why should I? But over the last couple years, I've been giving it the chance it deserves. And you know what? I'm really happy I did. When the PS Vita was first announced, it was pretty damn exciting. The PSP was just a great handheld. My wife bought two of them. We mostly had it for the God of War games though. It was a great first effort by Sony at entering the handheld market that was long dominated by Nintendo. But let's be honest, the PSP wasn't perfect. But overall, it was a nice piece of hardware. But when the Vita was announced, I think it's safe to say that we were all expecting a much more improved version of the PSP. While improved it was, mistakes were made right from the get-go. But we're not here to discuss its history as much as I want to share my 12 reasons why I love and hate the Vita. Technically the title is a bit deceiving because technically I only have 6 reasons for each, but in total there are 12 reasons. And hate's a bit of a strong word, but it sounds so much more better than dislike. But before we get to my reasons, I just want to go over a little bit of history I have with the Vita. At launch, I wasn't a fan of the price tag, to be honest, but I usually don't buy most hardware at launch anyways, so it didn't really matter all that much. Either way, I was going to wait until a new portable God of War was announced before I bought the Vita. Looking back now, it's such a good thing I didn't wait for that, because obviously I would have never owned a Vita if that was the case. But there were games that were coming out that really caught my interest, like Killzone Mercenary and Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, but I was still waiting for God of War. But then my best friend Kevin bought a Vita, and he said that Mortal Kombat on the Vita was good and had some extra content that wasn't in the complete version for the PC and consoles, like extra costumes and etc. Eventually he convinced me to get one, so I started looking on eBay for a cheap Vita, and I found an amazing deal. I don't remember the price exactly, but it was extremely low for everything that came with this Vita. Here is the bundle I got. It came with a PS Vita Model 1, an 8GB memory card, a Vita case, a silicone Vita protector, and 3 games, which were Little Deviants, Mod Nation Racers Road Trip, and Wipeout 2048. All in all, not a bad little bundle, especially for the price that I got it at. Once I paid for that bundle, I also bought Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation and Mortal Kombat, so when the Vita arrived I would have 5 games for it, instead of 3. I didn't know if those 3 games were going to be a great first experience, but I felt more confident that Assassin's Creed and Mortal Kombat would deliver the goods. And they did, so right choice on my part. But quickly after that first month, I started to care less about the Vita. And it didn't help that I couldn't put some PS1 games on it that I wanted to, like the Crash Bandicoot games. I also started to notice a lot of the games were just ports of console games. After I installed all my games and the PS1 games that I had, I quickly ran out of space. And that's when the huge issue with the prices of the memory cards came up. I was not willing to pay those prices. So quickly I started to forget about the Vita, and I didn't touch it for years. I started to feel like there wasn't a real reason for it to exist. And I just felt like Sony dropped the ball, and I was having huge buyer's remorse. I was like, why did I buy this thing? But for me, I'm not one to trade in or sell my hardware, so I just kept it in a drawer to never be seen again. For me, Vita didn't mean life. It meant death. But thankfully over the past couple years, there have been 2 factors that changed my mind about how I felt about the PlayStation Vita. The first factor being the Vita's passionate fan base. While some go to extreme levels of fanboyism that I just don't condone, there are a lot of people that really truly love this handheld. And I must admit, the more I watch, it became contagious. I could just start to see all the benefits through the eyes of these fans that live and breathe Vita. I just couldn't stop watching videos on the system. I wanted to find out what was I not seeing. And the more games I saw that were on the Vita, I started to get more excited. And that led me to finally find my Vita, take it out of its drawer, plug it in, and start to charge it back up with life. Because now I knew, hey, there were some games out there that I really wanted to get and I really wanted to play on the Vita. And the more games I bought and played, the more I started to really love playing on this handheld. Something special was happening. But I think it also helps that I have a soft spot for underdogs. And this system just reminded me of the Sega Saturn. A system that was great, but it just didn't get the support it needed, and it died. And it's sad. Saturn was a great console, just how the Vita is a great handheld. And it's a shame that a lot of people don't see it. Now, the other factor that really got me starting to like the PS Vita a lot more was the Nintendo Switch. The Switch had amazing marketing that made it clear that this was a hybrid between a console and a handheld, and they wanted to give us console gaming on the go. This is what the Vita wanted to do, but I feel it just wasn't marketed correctly because no one I knew even saw the Vita as a console on the go. We all just saw it as a powerful handheld with console graphics. But that's not our fault. A true console experience on the go is a platform that you can play at home, on your TV, or on the go that uses the same formats, like the Sega Nomad and the Nintendo Switch. On the Vita, you had to buy the same games twice, once on the console on disc format and once on the Vita with their cartridge format. And when they did want you to play the Vita on TV, you had to buy a peripheral known as the PS TV, which was expensive and wasn't even capable of playing all the Vita games without hacking it. But overall, while watching tons of videos on YouTube about the Vita and playing the Vita and buying more games for it, I'm starting to really appreciate how awesome the system is. It's just a shame Sony didn't see its potential. It's also a shame that Sony tried to kill it in every way possible. But please don't get my words twisted. Yes, I love the handheld, but it's not perfect, and unlike many other Vita fans, I don't think that it's the best handheld ever. I'd rather play the Switch, the 3DS, the DS, the Game Boy Advance, and the PSP over the Vita. That doesn't change that it's a great handheld, it's just not the best when it comes to its library. But in short, I'm really loving the Vita, and I want to share my reasons why I love it, but to be fair, it's not without flaws. So in the spirit of fairness, I will also share what I hate about the Vita. And on that note, let's get to my 12 reasons why I love and hate the PS Vita. I'm going to go back and forth between hate and love, starting with hate so we end up on a love reason. Also, please note, my reasons are subjective. These are just my personal feelings and beliefs when it comes to the Vita. So please, don't take it too personally. Number 6. It's not comfortable to hold. Personally, the Vita hurts my hands after extended gameplay sessions. Now that's not exclusive to the Vita though. This goes for most handhelds. Handhelds just aren't as comfortable to hold as a controller, which is why I ended up buying a grip for the Vita. It just allows it to feel more like a controller, so now I can actually play for much longer than I can without. Please mind though, I only have the 1000 model. I don't know how the 2000 model feels. I do want to get one eventually though. I'm loving that aqua blue model. Number 6. OLED screen. Yes, the 1000 model has a beautiful OLED screen. Now I have heard that these may degrade after a while, which is why I also want to get the 2000 model as a backup. The 2000 model has an LCD which doesn't look as great but ends up being more reliable in the long run. Plus, the 2000 model also has some other benefits as well, but while the OLED holds up, these games look fantastic. Number 5. Hardware gimmicks. Why do handhelds feel the need to add hardware gimmicks that no one uses? The Nintendo 3DS had the 3D feature, which was nice and innovative, but in the long run, who uses it? Most people turn it on for a few seconds to see how it looks, and then quickly turns it off. I know I do, which is why the 2DS model is so appealing. Plus, removing it helps to bring down the cost of the system. For the Vita, it has a touchscreen on the front and the back. Now, I don't really need the front touchscreen, but it's fine and it doesn't feel too intrusive most of the time, so it gets a pass. But the back touchscreen though, I just must ask, why? Why was this implemented into the PS Vita? It's just innovation for innovation's sake. I never really see anyone who likes it, and developers sure didn't seem to want to use it. For the ones who did, it's more like they only used it because they were forced to implement it in their game somehow, even if it was counterintuitive most of the time. Number 5. A second analog stick. If there was one thing wrong with the PSP, it was that it only had one analog stick. But luckily Sony had the genius idea to add a second analog stick to the PS Vita, which allows for a more true FPS console experiences on the handheld like Killzone Mercenary. This also allows us to make some PSP games even more playable than they were before, like Resistance Retribution. Number 4. No dedicated L2 and R2 or L3 and R3. Now technically, this is what the back touchscreen is for, but this back screen feels so cumbersome to use. I can't imagine playing games that rely heavily on the L2 and R2. This back screen also makes the remote play feature completely useless in my opinion. There is no comfortable way of playing PS4 games on the Vita, especially if the game heavily uses the triggers or the L3 and R3. I tried to give the back touchscreen a chance with the remote play, but no way was that happening. It's horrible. There's no two ways about it. Handhelds need real dedicated triggers, but thankfully there are some grips for the Vita that actually add triggers to it. So there's always that. Number 4. Emulation settings for PS1 and PSP games. If you hold on to the PS button while playing a PS1 game or a PSP game, a new settings menu pops up. On this menu, you can add bilinear filtering that smooths out the texture. You can also make use of the right analog stick for PSP games, like I mentioned earlier with Resistance Retribution. This small feature goes a long way to improving your enjoyment of playing PS1 and PSP games on the Vita. Number 3. No backwards compatibility with PSP UMDs. Instead of spending resources into adding a useless back touchscreen, maybe they should have spent R&D on making sure you could play UMDs on the Vita. I'm sure this accounted for many PSP owners not buying a Vita. All of a sudden, people who supported Sony by purchasing their first handheld and a library of games were left by the wayside when it came to their second handheld. Nintendo knew that being able to play Game Boy games on the next models such as the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance was a huge factor. The same with playing DS games on the 3DS. If you have a popular handheld that sold millions of units and millions of more games, it's usually a smart idea to make sure your fan base can still play that library on your next handheld effort. This choice to not add a UMD drive was catastrophic in my opinion. I haven't seen too many Vita owners bring this fact up. According to VG charts, the PSP sold over 80 million units worldwide to date, but the Vita has only sold over 16 million units worldwide to date. That is a huge drop off. That could be because all the PSP fans who bought lots of physical games could no longer play them on the Vita, so they passed it up. Not having a UMD drive was and still is a huge issue. A lot of people like to own physical copies, but with the Vita they can't. They have to rebuy all their PSP games in digital form, and from the Vita hardware sales, it seems like most PSP owners chose not to. Backwards compatibility is extremely important in the handheld market. Plus, not having to install PSP games would have saved on memory card space. Number 3. Backwards compatibility through PSN. While it was terrible to not have the Vita backwards compatible with the PSP UMDs, at least the PSN store still did allow you to download most PSP and PS1 games for owners who maybe didn't own a PSP or a PS1. I'd much rather have some form of backwards compatibility than none at all. Also, while some people find it hard to go back to the PS1 simply because the graphics haven't aged well and don't look all that great on a modern TV, these games look superb on the Vita. I also find the larger screen is better for PSP games. Number 2. Not all PS1 and PSP games are available on the Vita. But for everything the Vita does right, it does something wrong. Because not all PSP and PS1 games are available for the Vita. You can't play Crash Team Racing on the Vita, or even games like Crisis Core. So while it's great that the Vita does support PS1 and PSP emulation, it's not perfect, which this just adds to the problem that the Vita lacks a UMD drive. This wouldn't have been an issue for the PSP games at least. But again, Sony has no fucking idea what they are doing when it comes to the handhelds. Number 2, exclusives. Okay, I know the Vita doesn't have a whole lot of exclusives. It has only around 76 exclusive games on the system. Now that isn't amazing by any means, especially compared to the 3DS that has around 206 exclusives. But with that being said, I'm positive in those 76 games you will find a good chunk that you will want to own and play. Like for my taste, there is Army Corps of Hell, Dead or Alive 5 Plus, Dynasty Warriors Next, Killzone Mercenary, Little Big Planet PS Vita, Resistance Burning Skies, Tearaway, Uncharted Golden Abyss, Unit 14, and Wipeout 2048. I would have mentioned Gravity Rush, but that was ported to the PS4, and the sequel was only released on the PS4. There are other games like Freedom Wars, Little Deviants, Mod Nation Racers Road Trip, Ridge Racers, Silent Hill Book of Memories, Soul Sacrifice, and Touch My Katamari, but not all of these are to my taste. Sure, I know what you're saying. That's it? Well, for me, yeah, there are other exclusive games, but either I don't know what they are or I don't care about them. Out of 76 games, there has to be at least a handful of games you will enjoy. I know for me there's at least 10, nothing special, but I can only take what was offered on the Vita. And for the exclusives I do have, I do really enjoy playing them. Number 1, proprietary memory cards. This is one of the many flaws that hurt the Vita. To download digital Vita games or PSP and PS1 games, you will need a lot of space. Now this should be simple. Just go out and buy an SD card and boom, you're ready to go. Unfortunately, Sony made sure it wasn't that simple. They were scared of piracy because of what happened with the PSP, so they decided to create their own proprietary memory cards for the Vita. Now, there is nothing wrong in going this route, but they tried to screw over the fans who were supporting them. At launch, there were only 4 options available. A 4GB card for $19.99. Seriously? An 8GB card for $29.99. What the fuck? A 16GB card for $59.99? Are you fucking crazy? And a 32GB card for $99.99. Fuck you, Sony. That's insane. Look at how much this would have cost you at launch. Okay, first I need the Vita. So that right there is $249 before tax. Now, game prices varied from $9.99 to $49.99 at launch. So if I misquote a game's price tag, please correct me, okay? I don't want to spend too much money on launch day, so I would have at least bought 2 games. Now, for my taste at launch, I would have bought Army Corps of Hell and Uncharted Golden Abyss. I'm assuming both were $49.99, so that's $99.98 before tax. Now our total is $348.98. But now I need a memory card. Logically, I would have gone with the 16GB, just because I don't feel 4 or 8GB is enough space. I can work with 16GB, and while I would love 32GB, but that's $100. So let's go with the 16GB. And that is $59.99. So added with the cost of my Vita, and the games, the total is $408.97 before tax. That is insane for a handheld. Was it really a surprise that it didn't sell all that much? That's way too expensive. Now, prices are still expensive today. At least they have come down in price. On Amazon, the 8GB is $23.99. Still a bit high, but better than $29.99. The 16GB is $36.90. That's an extreme drop from $59.99. And we have the 32GB for $58.99, which is much better than $99.99. If these were the prices at launch, it still would have been a lot, but it wouldn't have looked so bad. But now, we also have 64GB that are selling for $89.90. And I have this one. I got mine for around $80 on eBay. I knew I was going to download a lot of games, so it just made sense to spend the money on this high-priced memory card. Honestly, that's my advice. If you plan on buying lots of games for the Vita, just say fuck it and get a 64GB card. But thankfully for those who haven't kept up with the updates on the Vita, you can hack it and use regular, less expensive SD cards. This is the preferred method, but of course you have to have the right update on your Vita. If you update it too high, well, you're fucked for now. But that might all change by this year. Number 1. A diverse library. Okay, while the exclusives may be low in number, the library in total isn't. There are at least 1,553 games on the Vita, and that is not including PS1, PSP, and PS Mini games. There is a lot of games on this system, and many diverse genres that should keep you interested. There is a decent amount of AAA games, but over the years the Vita has amassed tons upon tons of indie games, all with their own unique genres and flavors. The Vita has action, adventure, family, fighting, MMOs, music, platformers, puzzles, racing, RPGs, simulations, sports, strategy games, and so much more. It's definitely big on visual novels, which I couldn't care less about, but if that's your thing, there is plenty on here. There is a lot to choose from. There is no way you won't find a good chunk of games to play on the Vita. Sure, a lot of games are just ports and some don't run as well as their console and PC counterparts, but that's the sacrifice you make for portability. I don't care about playing Street Fighter X Tekken on my PC, but I enjoy playing it on the Vita on the go. Seriously, I wish I could see how the Vita fared in an alternate universe where it got the support it needed from Sony and third-party developers. I can just imagine what other games would have shown up on it. The Vita has so much potential, but it died an early death from not having a UMD drive, expensive memory cards, and no support from its creator or third-party developers. Sure, I know some will fight tooth and nail by saying it is not dead. There are a lot of games on it. Just because some people are still putting games on the NES and Dreamcast doesn't mean the console isn't dead. It's past its lifetime. Once the company who created the hardware stops supporting it and most third-party developers follow suit, it's dead. No amount of indie games can change that fact. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy buying the backlog of games for a dead system. You can, and it's great and it's awesome. So overall, what do you think about the video and my points? And what do you think about the Vita? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed what I showed you here, leave a like. If not, then leave a dislike. I can't please everyone. So that's it for now. I'm gonna go play some more Vita, and until next time, stay safe out there and keep on gaming, gamers.